The Caitlin Clark incident that nobody saw coming just changed everything in the WNBA forever. What started as a routine game turned into an all-out war that exposed the dark truth about what really happens when the cameras aren't rolling. And the player who finally stood up for Caitlin Clark became a legend overnight, but at a cost nobody expected. June 17, 2025 started like any other game day for the Indiana Fever. But hidden beneath the surface, tensions were about to explode in ways that would shock the basketball world. Caitlin Clark had just returned from a quad injury that kept her sidelined for 3 weeks. During that time, something changed in the league. The whispers got louder, the jealousy more obvious, and certain players made it clear they had been waiting for her return. Here's what the league doesn't want you to know. While Caitlin was injured, viewership dropped by 47%, ticket sales plummeted, and suddenly, those same players who claimed she was getting too much attention realized just how much they needed her. But instead of welcoming her back, they had other plans. Sophie Cunningham knew something was off the moment they walked into the arena. The Connecticut Sun players weren't just preparing for a game, they were preparing for war. And their target was clear. Sources close to the team revealed that certain Sun players held a meeting the night before specifically discussing how to quote-unquote handle Caitlin Clark. The pregame warm-ups told the whole story. While Caitlin and Sophie showed up wearing white, symbolizing peace and unity, the Sun players had a different energy entirely. Marina Mabrey, who had lost 12 straight games to Caitlin dating back to college, was overheard saying, "This ends tonight." JC Sheldon, who had a history of dirty plays, was practicing defensive moves that looked more like MMA techniques than basketball.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Just days before this game, a petition had started circulating amongst certain WNBA players. The petition, which has since been deleted, called for stricter enforcement of defensive rules, specifically targeting players who shoot from logo range. Everyone knew who that was aimed at. The petition gathered over 200 signatures from players across the league before mysteriously disappearing. The moment the game tipped off, you could feel the electricity. But this wasn't normal competitive energy. This was something darker. The Suns' defensive strategy became clear immediately. Double team Caitlin Clark from the moment she crossed half court. Triple team her if she even looked at the three-point line. And if that didn't work, well, they had other methods. Watch what happens in the first 2 minutes. Caitlin brings the ball up court, and immediately, 2 defenders swarm her. Not normal defensive pressure, but grabbing, holding, scratching. The refs see it, but do nothing. This was going to be that kind of night. A night where the rule book apparently didn't apply to defenders guarding Caitlin Clark. Sophie Cunningham noticed it too. As the backup point guard, she had the best view of what was happening. She saw the nails digging into Caitlin's arms, the subtle elbows to the ribs, the constant jersey pulling that the refs somehow missed. And Sophie had seen enough of this throughout the season. Tonight, she decided would be different. The first quarter was a masterclass in how to defend someone when the refs aren't calling fouls. Every time Caitlin touched the ball, she was met with contact that would make NFL players jealous. But here's the thing about generational talents. They find a way. Despite being grabbed, held, and scratched, Caitlin still managed to drain her first three-pointer. The crowd erupted. The Sun bench looked worried. And that's when things started to escalate. Marina Mabrey had been assigned as Caitlin's primary defender, but calling it defense would be generous. It was more like harassment. Every possession brought new levels of physicality, pushes in the back, feet trying to trip her up, and always the constant talking. Sources on the court said Mabrey was telling Caitlin, "You don't belong here and this is our league," over and over. But Caitlin's response was perfect. Instead of engaging in the trash talk, she let her game do the talking. A behind-the-back dribble to create space. A step-back three-pointer that hit nothing but net. A no-look pass that found her teammate for an easy layup. Each play was a dagger to the Suns' game plan. They wanted to intimidate her. Instead, they were making her stronger. That's when JC Sheldon entered the picture, known around the league as one of the most physical defenders. Sheldon had a reputation that preceded her. 3 weeks earlier, she had cracked Sophie Cunningham's tooth with an elbow that was ruled a common foul. Now she was being brought in with one mission: Stop Caitlin Clark by any means necessary. The second quarter brought new levels of aggression. Sheldon wasn't even pretending to play basketball anymore. She was fouling Caitlin before she even caught the ball, grabbing her jersey on every cut, and the scratching. Oh, the scratching! Long nails that the WNBA supposedly has rules about were being used as weapons. Red marks appeared on Caitlin's arms. Still no calls from the referees. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Reports have now surfaced that before the game, one of the referees was overheard saying, "We need to let them play physical tonight. Too many people are saying we're protecting certain players." This wasn't incompetence. This was a deliberate decision to let the Sun do whatever they wanted to Caitlin Clark. Sophie Cunningham had reached her breaking point. She pulled Caitlin aside during a timeout and said enough is enough. If they want to play dirty, we can play dirty too. But Caitlin's response showed why she's different. She told Sophie, "No, we win the right way. Let them expose themselves. The whole world is watching." And she was right. Social media was exploding. Every dirty play was being clipped and shared millions of times. Former players were speaking out. Chris Evert, the tennis legend, tweeted, "When will these ladies realize, accept and appreciate that Caitlin Clark is the best thing that ever happened to women's basketball?" Even players from other sports were noticing what was happening. But the Sun didn't care about public perception. They had a game plan and they were sticking to it. The third quarter brought the most shocking moment yet. As Caitlin was bringing the ball up court, Sheldon reached in for a steal. But she wasn't going for the ball. Her hand went straight for Caitlin's face. Fingers extended, nails first, direct contact with Caitlin's eye. The arena gasped. Caitlin grabbed her face in pain. And that's when 17,000 people witnessed something they'll never forget. Caitlin Clark had finally had enough. She pushed Sheldon. Not hard, not violent, just a push that said, "I'm done being your punching bag." What happened next shocked everyone. Marina Mabrey, who wasn't even involved in the play, came flying in from the side and body-checked Caitlin to the ground. A complete cheap shot on a player who was already hurt. The crowd erupted in boos. Parents were covering their children's eyes. This wasn't basketball anymore. But here's where the story gets really crazy. The referees huddled up to discuss the punishment. Everyone in the arena knew what should happen. Mabrey should be ejected for the body check. Sheldon should get a flagrant 2 for the eye poke. Instead, after a 5-minute review, they gave Sheldon a flagrant 1. Mabrey got a common technical. And in the most shocking decision of all, Caitlin Clark also received a technical foul. The explanation from the referees would later become infamous. They said Caitlin reacted in an unsportsmanlike manner. She pushed a player who had just poked her in the eye. According to the refs, that was equal to being body slammed to the ground. The arena couldn't believe it. Stephanie White, the Fever coach, was furious, but the fix was in. This is when Sophie Cunningham decided she had seen enough. For months, she had watched her teammate get abused by opponents while referees looked the other way. She had seen the scratches, the bruises, the constant cheap shots, and now they were literally poking her in the eye and getting away with it. Sophie made a decision that would change her life forever. With 10 minutes left in the game, Sophie started shadowing Sheldon everywhere she went. Not playing defense, just making her presence known, letting Sheldon know that someone was watching, that actions have consequences. The tension in the arena was unbearable. Everyone could feel something was about to happen. Meanwhile, Caitlin was putting on one of the greatest performances of her career. The eye poke had awakened something in her. She was seeing the game in slow motion. Every pass was perfect. Every shot was pure. She was showing the Sun and the entire WNBA that you can't bully greatness. You can only make it stronger. She hit a 3-pointer from 35 feet and stared directly at the Sun bench. She threw a behind-the-back pass in traffic that left defenders grasping at air. She was playing at a level that transcended the sport. This wasn't just basketball, this was art. And she was painting her masterpiece with the blood from her scratches as the paint. The Sun were getting desperate. Their plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of intimidating Caitlin, they had unleashed her final form. The score was getting out of hand. The Fever were up by 15, then 17, then 20. The Commissioner Cup Finals were slipping away from Connecticut. They had one last card to play. With 2 minutes left, they sent in their enforcer, a player whose only job was to quote-unquote send a message. She immediately went after Caitlyn with a forearm to the back. No call. Then an elbow to the ribs. No call. It was clear the referees had decided nothing short of assault would be called a foul. That's when fate intervened. With 46 seconds left, Sheldon stole the ball and was racing toward an easy layup. The game was already decided. The Fever were up by 17. This basket meant nothing. But Sophie Cunningham had been waiting for this moment. She sprinted down the court with a determination that cameras would later show was unlike anything seen before. What happened next has been viewed over 100 million times. Sophie didn't just foul Sheldon, she wrapped her up completely. Arms around the shoulders, no play on the ball, just a clear message that said, "This ends now." Sheldon went to the ground and immediately jumped up looking for a fight. She charged at Sophie, who was ready for whatever came next. The benches cleared. Players from both teams rushed onto the court. Security scrambled to separate everyone. And in the middle of it all stood Sophie Cunningham. Calm, collected, unafraid. She had done what she came to do. She had stood up for her teammate when no one else would. Not the referees, not the league, not anyone. The referees spent 10 minutes reviewing the play. The outcome was predetermined. Sophie was ejected. So was Sheldon. So was Lindsay Allen, who had tried to escalate the situation. But Sophie didn't care. As she walked off the court, something amazing happened. The entire arena gave her a standing ovation. 17,000 people, recognizing a player who had sacrificed herself to protect her teammate. But the story doesn't end there. Within hours, Sophie Cunningham became the most popular player in the WNBA. Her jersey sold out in minutes. She gained 550,000 TikTok followers overnight. Celebrities were praising her. Fans were calling her a hero. She had done what everyone wanted to do. She had stood up to the bullies. The next day, the WNBA tried to do damage control. They upgraded Mabry's technical to a flagrant 2. They fined several players undisclosed amounts, but they refused to address the real issue, the systematic targeting of Caitlin Clark that had been happening all season. The 17% of all flagrant fouls in the league that were committed against one player. Here's what really happened behind closed doors. Sources within the league office revealed that there was a heated debate about suspensions. Some executives wanted to suspend Mabry and Sheldon for multiple games. Others worried about the message it would send. In the end, they chose the coward's way out. Small fines that meant nothing. No real consequences for trying to injure the face of the league. But the aftermath told the real story. The petition to ban Sophie Cunningham from the WNBA, started by Sun fans, got 200 signatures. The petition to give her a medal got 2 million. She posted a TikTok, lip-syncing to "Can't Keep My Hands to Myself" with the caption, "It's a joke." The sound was too fitting. It got 10 million views in 12 hours. Caitlin Clark's response was perfect. When asked about the incident, she said, "Sophie's my teammate, and I'll always have her back like she has mine." She offered to pay any fines Sophie received. She made it clear that the Fever were united, that you come for one, you come for all. The bullies had failed to divide them. The Suns' coach tried to play victim. He called Sophie's foul stupid and disrespectful. He conveniently forgot to mention his players poking eyes and body-slamming opponents. He forgot to mention the pregame meeting about handling Caitlin Clark. He forgot that everyone had seen what really happened. But here's the most important part of this story. The game had massive implications for the Commissioner Cup. The Fever needed to win, and have the Liberty win to make the finals. Both things happened. Despite everything thrown at them, despite the referees, despite the dirty plays, despite the assault, Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever were heading to the championship game. The viewership numbers tell the real story. This game became the third most watched WNBA game in history. Not because of the basketball, although Caitlin's performance was legendary, but because people witnessed something real. They saw a superstar getting targeted and responding with greatness. They saw a teammate stand up when it mattered most. They saw what happens when jealousy meets generational talent. In the days that followed, more stories emerged. Players from around the league privately reached out to thank Sophie for doing what they wished they could do. They shared their own stories of watching Caitlin get abused game after game. They expressed frustration with referees who seemed to have different rules for different players. The league's response was predictable and pathetic. They released a statement about emphasizing sportsmanship moving forward. They promised to review officiating standards. They did everything except address the actual problem, that certain players had made it their mission to hurt Caitlin Clark. And the league had allowed it to happen. But something had changed that night. The dynamic had shifted. Other teams saw what happened when you tried to bully the Fever. They saw Sophie Cunningham become a folk hero overnight. They saw Caitlin Clark rise above the violence and dominate anyway. The message was clear. The days of free shots at Caitlin were over. The impact went far beyond basketball. Youth coaches across the country used the incident as a teaching moment. Stand up for your teammates. Don't let bullies win. Play the right way even when others don't. Sophie Cunningham jerseys became the must-have item for young players who understood loyalty and courage. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark just kept being Caitlin Clark. She returned from the injury stronger than ever. She led the league in assists. She revolutionized how basketball could be played. She proved that greatness can't be stopped by dirty plays or biased referees or jealous opponents. It can only be temporarily slowed down. The friendship between Caitlin and Sophie became legendary. They were seen working out together constantly, supporting each other on and off the court. Sophie had risked everything to protect her teammate, and Caitlin made sure everyone knew how much that meant. Their bond became a symbol of what team sports should be about. But the haters didn't stop. They couldn't stop. A petition actually started to ban Sophie from the league, calling her violent and dangerous. It perfectly captured the delusion of Caitlin's critics. The player who had been protecting someone from assault was being called violent. The player who had endured months of abuse in silence was being defended by someone called dangerous. The basketball world rallied around Sophie. NBA players tweeted their support. Tyrese Halliburton, Caitlin's close friend, said Sophie did what any good teammate would do. Enough is enough. The message was spreading beyond women's basketball. Professional athletes understood what Sophie had done and why it mattered. 3 days later, Caitlin returned to action against the Liberty. No one knew what to expect. Would the eye injury affect her shot? Would she be tentative after the assault? The answer came quickly. 14 points in the first quarter, 9 points in a 38-second span. She was sending a message louder than any words could convey. She finished with 32 points, 9 assists, and 8 rebounds. The Liberty's perfect season ended. Caitlin Clark had taken everything they threw at her, literally and metaphorically, and responded with one of the greatest performances in WNBA history. The haters had created a monster, a player who now knew she could survive anything. The Commissioner Cup Finals became a coronation. Caitlin Clark showing the world what happens when you try to break someone who's unbreakable. Sophie Cunningham by her side, ready to enforce justice if needed. The Indiana Fever had transformed from a team that missed the playoffs for 7 years to a championship contender, all because they refused to be bullied. But this story is bigger than one game or one season. It's about what happens when excellence meets envy, when talent meets jealousy, when someone special comes along and threatens the status quo. The WNBA had a choice: protect their golden goose or let the foxes into the henhouse. They chose poorly. The numbers don't lie. Since Caitlin Clark entered the league, attendance is up 400%. TV ratings have tripled. Jersey sales have exploded. She didn't just change women's basketball, she saved it. And how did some players respond? With violence, with cheap shots, with attempts to literally poke her eyes out. But they failed to understand something fundamental about greatness. You can't destroy it with dirty plays. You can't intimidate it with violence. You can only reveal your own insecurity and jealousy. Every scratch, every cheap shot, every dirty play just highlighted the gap between Caitlin Clark and everyone else. Sophie Cunningham understood this. That's why she did what she did. Not because she's violent or out of control, but because she recognized that someone special was being targeted and decided to be the shield. She sacrificed her own reputation to protect greatness. That's not violence, that's heroism. The aftermath continues to reverberate through the sport. Young players now wear Sophie Cunningham jerseys as a badge of honor. They understand what she represents: loyalty, courage, the willingness to stand up when it matters most. She became more than a player. She became a symbol. And Caitlin Clark? She just keeps elevating the game, breaking records, selling out arenas, inspiring millions. The scratches healed, the bruises faded, but the impact remains. She showed that grace under fire isn't just a saying, it's a way of life, a way to transcend those who try to bring you down. The WNBA has a choice to make. Continue to allow the targeting of their biggest star, or finally protect the player who brought millions of new fans to the sport. The referees have a choice to make. Call the game fairly, or continue to enable those who think violence is a defensive strategy. The players have a choice to make. Compete with class, or continue down a path that exposes their own limitations. But regardless of what they choose, one thing is certain. Caitlin Clark will keep being great. Sophie Cunningham will keep protecting her teammate. The Indiana Fever will keep winning. And millions of fans will keep watching, inspired by two players who showed what basketball is really about. Not just the final score, but how you play the game, how you treat each other, how you respond when tested. This isn't just a basketball story, it's a human story, about jealousy and greatness, about violence and grace, about standing up and standing out. The night of June 17th, 2025 will be remembered not for the score, but for what it revealed. That some players can't handle someone else's success, that some referees can't do their job, but most importantly, that greatness combined with loyalty is unstoppable. The message to every young player watching is clear. Be like Caitlin. Rise above the hate. Let your talent speak louder than their violence. And be like Sophie. Stand up for what's right. Protect those who need protecting. Show that loyalty matters more than personal statistics. The Indiana Fever went on to compete for championships. Caitlin Clark continued to revolutionize basketball. Sophie Cunningham became a cult hero. The haters continued to hate, but they had already lost. They lost the moment they decided violence was their only answer to greatness. They lost the moment Sophie Cunningham decided enough was enough. This is the story they don't want told. The story of how jealousy and violence failed to stop generational talent. The story of how one player's courage changed everything. The story of how basketball revealed the best and worst of human nature. But most of all, the story of how Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham showed the world what really matters. The game ended with the Fever winning by 17, but the real victory was bigger than any score. It was proof that bullies don't win, that greatness prevails, that loyalty matters, and that sometimes all it takes is one person standing up to change everything. Sophie Cunningham stood up. Caitlin Clark stood tall. And women's basketball will never be the same. Remember this story. Tell this story, because it's not just about basketball, it's about choosing sides when it matters most. The WNBA chose wrong. The referees chose wrong. But Sophie Cunningham chose right. And that choice made her a legend overnight. Not for violence, but for valor. Not for fighting, but for protecting. Not for hate, but for love of a teammate who deserved better. The white uniforms they wore that night, symbolizing peace, became stained with blood and sweat and tears. But they also became symbols of something more, of standing up to bullies, of protecting greatness, of showing that some things matter more than personal safety or reputation. Sophie Cunningham knew the consequences of her actions. She did it anyway. That's not violence, that's courage. And Caitlin Clark, she could have retaliated, could have fought back, could have lowered herself to their level. Instead, she chose to dominate, to excel, to show that the best revenge against haters is massive success. Every three-pointer was an answer. Every assist, a statement. Every victory, a reminder that greatness can't be stopped, only delayed. This is their story. This is our story. The story of what happens when excellence meets envy and refuses to bow down. the story continues. The haters still hate. The referees still miss calls. But something fundamental has changed. Players think twice before targeting Caitlin Clark, because now they know Sophie Cunningham is watching, and she's not afraid to act. That's the legacy of June 17, 2025. Not just a game, but a moment. Not just a foul, but a statement. Not just two players, but a movement. The movement that says, greatness will be protected, excellence will be defended, and bullies will be stopped by any means necessary. The sold-out jerseys tell the story. The millions of views tell the story. The standing ovations tell the story. But most of all, Caitlin Clark's continued dominance tells the story. You can try to hurt her. You can try to stop her. You can try to break her. But all you'll do is make her stronger and create legends like Sophie Cunningham in the process. If you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that like button. If you think Sophie Cunningham is a hero, drop a comment below. And if you want to see more stories about athletes who refuse to be bullied, make sure to subscribe, because this is just the beginning. The revolution has started, and it's being led by a point guard who shoots from the logo and a teammate who isn't afraid to fight for what's right.